Plan and conduct evacuation of premises. In this competency, you will learn the following. Contribute to writing a policy and procedures for an evacuation situation. Participate in conducting evacuation drills. Conduct evacuation. Contribute to writing a policy and procedures for an evacuation situation.
An emergency, such as a fire or bomb threat, can happen in any workplace. In some cases, it may be appropriate to evacuate a room, a floor, or even an entire building. Your workplace should already have an evacuation procedure in place. It's important that you familiarise yourself with this procedure and that you know what your role is should an evacuation be necessary.
When planning an evacuation procedure, your occupational health and safety requirements are of the utmost importance. These must be obtained and reviewed before commencing writing of the procedures. There are many different emergency scenarios that may require a building to be evacuated. These fall into three categories: emergencies such as fires, scenes of crime and accidents; hazardous situations such as physical, chemical, electrical or biological; and threats such as bombs and sabotage. These all pose very serious risk to the safety of the people at your workplace and must be discussed during planning. A system of emergency alerting also needs to be determined in consultation with the building manager, emergency services and fire wardens. This will ensure there is an understanding of the reasons for an evacuation and allow for the correct procedures to be followed. Any outcomes achieved in this consultative process should be incorporated into the policy before it is presented for evaluation by your supervisor, the building manager, emergency services and fire wardens. All information presented must use clear, concise language and needs to comply with any organisational requirements for format, style and structure. Be sure to check what the requirements are in your workplace. You will need to regularly review industry information as well as changes to the building, number of staff and visitors to establish whether there is a need to revise the current evacuation policy and procedures. Participate in conducting evacuation drills. Prior to any drills, the documented evacuation policy and procedures need to be handed out to the relevant people, namely the wardens, building manager and your supervisor. You'll need to make these persons aware of any changes or additions to the procedures, even if it does not directly affect their role. Any further information or support materials that accompany the main policy must be readily available and accessible. Make sure all relevant personnel are kept up to date with the locations and content of these materials. All workplaces must conduct regular, routine evacuation drills to ensure preparation and readiness. Be sure you are aware of your role not only during the evacuation procedure, but in the planning and implementation of drills. These must be scheduled on a regular basis in accordance with organisational procedures and industry requirements. Be sure to consult with the relevant persons throughout the planning of any drills at your workplace.
Evacuation roles. It's important to know whom to obey during an evacuation. The following roles may be assigned in your workplace. Chief Warden. These wear white helmets. They are responsible for calling the emergency services and meeting them when they arrive, deciding whether to evacuate and coordinating the evacuation and all other wardens. In the event of an emergency, they can usually be found at the main control panel if the building is fitted with one. Floor Warden. These wardens wear yellow helmets. They are responsible for notifying the Chief Warden of the type of emergency, coordination of the evacuation off their own floor or section, and combating the emergency if it's safe to do so. The floor wardens can normally be found at the communications airphone in contact with the Chief Warden at the main panel. Wardens. These wardens wear red helmets. They are responsible for assisting the floor warden and providing assistance to those needing help leaving the premises. The wardens can usually be found assisting the floor wardens. Smaller workplaces may not have assigned wardens, so ask your manager or supervisor of your workplace procedure. Remember, all employees have duties during an evacuation. If you discover an emergency situation, notify the warden immediately. Obey the warden's instructions. Close doors after all occupants have evacuated the room or stairwell. Do not use lifts. Instead, use the stairwells in an orderly fashion. Do not run, as this may cause panic. Even if your workplace does not follow this procedure exactly, it is your responsibility to know what your role is in an emergency. Evacuation alarms. There are two types of alarm that can be used in an emergency. The first is designed to alert wardens to the emergency. The second is the evacuation alarm, which means all people should evacuate the building or area. If your workplace is very noisy, there may be a visual alarm as well, such as a flashing red light. Evacuation procedures. These vary in each workplace, but there are some general rules about how to deal with an emergency. These are: operate the alarm, notify the emergency services, alert the wardens, ensure those who need help evacuating receive it, and move towards a specified assembly point so that the wardens can carry out head counts.
All evacuation drills must be conducted in accordance with the organisational policies and procedures. You must carry out all tasks in relation to your role, and if anyone requires assistance to either carry out their role or evacuate the building, you should do your best to cater to their needs. Be sure to make mental notes of the effectiveness of the evacuation, as this will assist later in providing feedback on how well it was carried out. Following the evacuation drill, feedback should be sought from colleagues and customers involved, and recommendations put forth for improvements or changes to the current policies and procedures. The information provided should include your own feedback and recommendations. Any changes or updates made should be done in a timely manner, with an updated procedure given to all relevant personnel. Conduct evacuation. If you discover a situation where you believe an evacuation is required, you must notify the relevant personnel in your workplace and contact the emergency services. All staff must be aware of the number to call to contact the emergency services, even if they are not a warden. For fire, police and ambulance, dial 000 and ask for the required service. Tell the operator the exact nature of the emergency, the exact address of your workplace, and the exact location of the problem or emergency. Keep a list of useful numbers, such as the Poisons Information Centre. Also keep the numbers and extensions of the wardens in your workplace. Keep this list where everyone can see it easily. During an evacuation, there may be hazards which impair or stop people from being able to leave the building. Blocked stairway exits, falling debris and smoke inhalation can all reduce the time and effectiveness of the evacuation. You may need to implement appropriate risk control measures, such as isolating the potential risk, providing access for emergency services or first aid. This should all be done within scope of your own competency, responsibility and authority. In an emergency, you may be required to act outside of your own role to implement these procedures. However, do not carry out any actions that could put your safety or the safety of those around you at risk. Any mobility impaired persons or persons requiring extra assistance should be identified and special arrangements implemented to ensure they are evacuated safely and effectively. The evacuation of the premises must be conducted in accordance with your organisational policies and procedures. This should be carried out via prescribed primary routes, or if this is not possible or practical, by designated alternative routes. All staff should be aware of the designated assembly point, usually outside the building in a car park or a large open area. All personnel must be accounted for here via a head count and/or a roll call. The method for accounting for evacuated personnel will be found in your organisational evacuation procedure. All relevant documentation must be completed in a timely manner in accordance with organisational procedures. This might include incident reports, request for assistance forms, and review and feedback of evacuation policy and procedures. In early 1997, 850 patrons were evacuated from the Metro nightclub. Nightclub staff were praised for a quick and efficient evacuation. The security firm operating at the Metro was Consolidated Security Services. We talked with their operations manager, Erhard Wiedemann.
What kind of measures, training and other such things, did staff go through to prepare them for an evacuation scenario?
The staff are required to participate in a fire and or evacuation drill, and the staff are all briefed at those times on where the evacuation points are, the type of firefighting equipment which is available to them, and also how to use them.
How did Metro staff assist emergency services when they arrived?
By basically directing the people to where the fire was, providing them with some information on how the fire occurred, also providing the services with information on the evacuation, how the evacuation went, if any injuries had taken place, whether any other emergency services required, like ambulances, and in this case I believe that some people were suffering from smoke inhalation. Yeah, they needed to know all of that type of information.